Hey everyone, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Today, we're diving into something pretty fascinating. A sort of historical blind spot, you could say.
Oh yeah? What do we got?
It's about the late Hundred Years' War, but there's a twist. The usual hero, Joan of Arc. Well, according to the historian we're looking at, Juliet Barker, Joan's impact was, well, maybe not what we think.
Okay, you've got my attention.
Yeah.
It's important than we think. How so?
Barker argues she was more like a temporary disturbance. The real story, she says, is this English kingdom of France that actually kept going for another 20 years after Joan died. A forgotten kingdom, basically.
Wow, okay. That definitely goes against the grain. So the source for this deep dive is a research dossier on Juliet Barker's book, Conquest, the English Kingdom of France, 1417-1450.
That's the one. And Barker herself is interesting. She holds a PhD in medieval history from Oxford, but she's also known for her literary biographies, so she brings a, perhaps, different perspective.
Right, a narrative historian. The book came out, let's see, UK 2009, US 2012. And her main point is that Henry V wasn't just conquering, he was building a real functioning state in France, this dual monarchy.
Exactly. A distinct political entity that lasted 30 years, from 1417 right up to 1450. It challenges how we usually frame that period.
And it sounds like she succeeded in getting that story out there. Reviewers, the popular ones anyway, they seem to love it. Phrases like magnificently readable, fluent, sparkling account kept popping up.
Oh, definitely. It excels as popular history. It takes all this complex academic research and weaves it into a really compelling narrative for, a general audience. That was clearly the goal.
There's always a but with academic reception.
Yeah, often, yes. Academics were more divided. The main critique you hear is that it's long in narrative and short in broader analysis.
Meaning it tells a great story, but maybe doesn't dig deep enough into the why.
Sort of. And crucially, it offers no original research. It's based entirely on published secondary sources. So for specialists, it's a brilliant synthesis, a fantastic bringing together of existing work, but not groundbreaking in terms of new discoveries.
Got it. Okay, let's unpack this then. Our mission today is really to understand Barker's argument. Why does she say this kingdom was forgotten? And crucially, if Joan wasn't the main reason it fell, what were the real strategic failures that brought it down?
Right. And to understand that, you have to start with the architect. Henry V, Barker's whole argument rests on his ambition being, well, unprecedented.
How so? Weren't English kings always grabbing bits of France?
Yes, but this was different. Barker frames it as wholesale conquest and permanent annexation. Starting with the invasion of Normandy in 1417, it wasn't just about territory anymore. It was about creating a lasting Anglo-French state, a real strategic shift.
A fundamental change in goals.
Absolutely. And he needed legitimacy for this grand project. That came from the Treaty of Troy in 1420.
Ah, yes, the treaty that made him regent and heir to the French throne.
Exactly. It provided the legal framework for this dual monarchy. For Barker, this is key. It wasn't just a military occupation. It was meant to be a legally established political reality.
And Henry V wasn't shy about enforcing that reality, was he? The sack of Caen in 1417. Sounds pretty brutal.
Oh, it was brutal. Streets running with blood, the sources say. But Barker makes a point of describing it not as random chaos, but as a calculated, exemplary punishment.
Exemplary punishment. How does that work?
Under the medieval laws of war, if a town refused a formal summons to surrender, the attacking commander had the legal right to sack it. Caen refused. So the brutality was, in a grim way, legally sanctioned. It shows Henry's ruthless, methodical approach to state building.
Cold and calculated. And this meticulous planning is why Barker insists on calling it a kingdom, not just an occupation.
Precisely. The English weren't just camping out. They set up a proper administration for the long haul. Take the Norman treasury, for example.
He set up a separate one.
Yes, the Chambre des Comptes in Caen, a dedicated central accounting office just for Normandy. That shows commitment, right?
Yeah.
Managing the finances locally, long-term.
Yeah, that's definitely more than just temporary control. It implies permanence.
And they put English officials, the baillis, sort of local magistrates and administrators, into key positions across Normandy. This whole institutional structure, Barker argues, shows a serious 3-decade-long state-building project.
Okay, so we have this established, functioning English kingdom in France. Now, let's bring in the figure everyone does remember, Joan of Arc. She's a symbol of French resistance. How does Barker fit her into this picture, of a resilient English state.
Well, this is where Barker really challenges the standard narrative. She essentially argues that Joan's dazzling achievements obscure the fact that they were of little long-term consequence.
Little long-term consequence. That sounds quite dismissive. She lifted the siege of Orleans, got the Dauphin crowned.
She absolutely did those things, boosted morale tremendously. But Barker points to the kingdom's resilience. The English administration didn't collapse. In fact,
Go on.
they managed to crown their own king, the infant Henry VI, as King of France in Paris just 6 months after Joan was executed.
6 months after.
Right. It demonstrates the administration was still very much functional, and critically, the kingdom itself endured for another 2 decades after Joan's brief career.
So her impact was more psychological than strategically decisive, in Barker's view.
That seems to be the argument. A major morale blow to the English and boost for the French, yes, but the actual political and administrative structure held firm for a long time afterwards.
Okay. So here's where it gets really interesting, like you said. If Joan wasn't the knockout blow, what was? What brought this 30-year kingdom crashing down?
Barker points squarely at 1435. A double whammy, really. A major political failure combined with a devastating personal loss for the English administration.
1435, that would be the Treaty of Arras.
Exactly. This was the turning point. England's absolutely crucial ally, Philip the Good, the Duke of Burgundy, switched sides. He made peace with the French Dauphin, Charles VII.
And Burgundy was indispensable.
Utterly. Think geographically. Burgundy acted like a buffer, protecting English Normandy and Paris from the main French forces. When Philip defected, the whole strategic map changed overnight. Suddenly, the English position was fundamentally exposed.
Okay, that's huge. And you said a personal loss, too.
Yeah, adding tragedy to the strategic disaster. Just days before the treaty was finalized, the English regent in France, John, Duke of Bedford, died.
Ah, Bedford. He's often portrayed as very capable, isn't he?
Very much so. Barker paints him as the tragic hero almost, a committed Francophile, dedicated, tirelessly working to make the dual monarchy function. He was the steady hand.
So his death created a vacuum.
A huge one. He was the glue holding things together administratively and politically, losing him right as their key ally walked away. That combination in 1435, for Barker, sealed the kingdom's long-term fate. The structure was fatally weakened.
So it wasn't one big battle, but this slow unraveling triggered by diplomacy and the loss of key leadership. Which leads us, I suppose, to Henry VI himself.
Precisely. If Henry V was the architect, his son Henry VI was, well, Barker portrays him as the opposite, the foolish young king.
Harsh words. What made him foolish in her view?
His deep piety seems to have translated into political naivety. He wasn't a warrior king like his father. He yearned for peace almost desperately, and that led to some, catastrophic decisions.
Like the Truce of Tours in 1444, you mentioned he wanted peace at any price.
Exactly, and the price was staggering. Here's a really mind-blowing detail Barker highlights. To secure the truce and a marriage alliance with a French princess, Henry VI secretly promised to just give away the entire county of Maine.
Give it away. Maine was strategically important, wasn't it? A buffer zone.
Hugely important, and he just agreed to hand it over secretly. It was a massive unilateral concession that achieved very little beyond the marriage itself.
I can't imagine how that went down with the English commanders and nobles in France.
It was disastrous for morale. They'd spent decades fighting and bleeding for that territory, and the king just signs it away. It showed a complete lack of understanding, or perhaps care, for the realities on the ground, a major policy failure.
And this links back to the academic critique you mentioned earlier about Barker focusing on personality over deeper issues.
Right. Barker really emphasizes Henry VI's personal failings here. But some historians argue that, yes, Henry made bad decisions, but the English kingdom was already teetering. The sheer cost, financial, logistical of maintaining this large occupying force and administration for 30 years was immense. England was arguably running out of resources.
So the argument is that the kingdom might have been unsustainable economically, regardless of who was king. Henry VI just sped up the collapse.
That's a significant part of the scholarly debate, yes. Henry's decisions provided the immediate trigger, but the underlying financial and structural weaknesses were profound. The kingdom might have been doomed anyway.
And Charles VII, the French king, he took advantage of this truce, didn't he?
Absolutely. While Henry VI was dreaming of peace and giving away land, Charles VII used the ceasefire brilliantly. He reformed his army, professionalized it, improved his finances. Basically, he prepared for the next round.
While the English presumably relaxed, thinking the war was winding down.
Pretty much. They let their guard down, demobilized troops, let garrisons weaken, so when the fighting inevitably restarted,
The contrast must have been stark.
incredibly stark. And the result was the speed of the collapse. This English kingdom, which had lasted 30 years, survived Joan of Arc, survived the loss of Burgundy for a while. It was completely crushed in just 12 months. Between 1449 and 1450, gone.
Just 12 months, a total wipeout after 3 decades. That's astonishing.
It really is, though Barker does give space to the moments of desperate heroism in that final year. Figures like John Talbot, the famous English Achilles.
Ah, Talbot, fighting to the last.
Exactly, leading valiant but ultimately doomed rearguard actions. Individual bravery was there, but it couldn't overcome the massive strategic and arguably financial failures.
Which brings us back to the book itself and how Barker tells this story. You mentioned the critique about narrative over analysis. Her chronological structure makes for a great read, but does it maybe obscure some of those deeper systemic reasons for the collapse?
That's the core of the academic critique. By focusing so intensely on the sequence of events, the treaties, the battles, the personalities like Bedford and Henry VI, the argument is that she doesn't fully explore why things happened the way they did. Particularly the economic unsustainability. It tells you what happened, often brilliantly, but maybe less about the fundamental why.
And there was another critique you mentioned about an English nationalist perspective.
Yes, that comes up too. Because the book is framed around the creation and eventual loss of this English kingdom of France, the focus is naturally on the English achievement, the English effort, and ultimately the English sense of tragedy and loss.
Which might downplay the French experience.
It risks doing that, yes. For the Norman population, this 30-year period wasn't the story of a functioning dual monarchy. It was often a brutal foreign occupation marked by heavy taxes, displacement, and constant warfare. Barker's focus is very much on the English administrative project and its fate.
So it's a perspective choice that shapes the narrative.
Definitely. But putting the critiques aside for a moment, the book's major achievement is undeniable.
Which is?
Its accessibility. Barker took decades of complex, often dense specialist research on this forgotten period and synthesized it into a single, coherent, and incredibly readable narrative for you, the general reader. Before this book, there wasn't really an accessible overview quite like it.
So it fills a gap, providing a framework where there wasn't one easily available before.
Precisely. It resurrects this dramatic, important chapter, the rise and fall of this ambitious Anglo-French state, and brings it to life, shifting the focus away from just Joan of Arc to the much longer, more complex political reality that followed her. It's an excellent starting point.
We've really only scratched the surface here. There's so much more in the book, the personalities, the specific campaigns, the administrative nuts and bolts. Conquest, the English Kingdom of France, 1417, 1450, really is packed with detail.
It absolutely is. This discussion is just a taster, really.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. It's been fascinating. And for everyone listening, if you enjoyed our conversation, please do like and subscribe.
Yeah, it helps others find the show.
And let us know what you think. Share your favorite moments, maybe your own take on Barker's arguments in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And please share this with any other history fans you know.
So here's something to think about. Juliet Barker argues Joan of Arc's long-term impact on the English kingdom was minimal. After hearing the evidence, do you think she was a national savior who truly turned the tide of the war? Or was she just a temporary and ultimately insignificant setback for a 30-year English rule?